Welcome to this episode of radio. I'm going to go with Government Paid Research Center because I have some extra computers lying around, and I'm getting, due to that whole discussion yesterday, the pension thing, I'm getting a bundle, meaning that I can actually do something. I can do one of these long-term plans that I have. And I think I'm going to take the secondary computers that I have, and most of them require some work. I can get new computers for very cheap, and I have my old school laptop, and it requires a new keyboard to do this well. And the laptop I currently have also requires a new keyboard as well as basic fixing. The laptop that I'm using, the keyboard is much more expensive to fix because it is very integral to the computer. I have talked with the repair guys, and the old school laptop that I have would be very cheap to fix because it is of the durable modular design type, but it is very old. So it would be very expensive to get it fixed to a good one in terms of how much benefit I would get from it. But the new laptop that I'm using, that's about a year old, is definitely worth fixing. But the old laptop works very well otherwise. Other than that, it only needs a USB keyboard. So once I go to the store, I will buy a keyboard and start using the secondary laptop due to having money to get it fixed, start using it for scientific research. And I wouldn't have this money unless the state paid me its due. So I'm considering this the start of the research company. I will be putting it on BOINC, which is Berkeley Open Infrastructure Network Computing, which is how I calculated my prime number. And I'm going to put it on some form of human DNA research, probably protein variations. But there might be others that are worthwhile. And I will have it on 24 hours a day at maximum overclocking. And it's a 10-year-old school laptop. And I will be producing scientific data on it only. The primary computer, the laptop that I have, I will get super fixed. I will switch out all the components that are about to break, and I will upgrade all the components that are cheap to upgrade. For example, if it's like 50 to $100 to get it from 16 gigabytes of memory to 32 or even 64, then I will pay for it. I do know the secondary hard drive as well as most likely the primary hard drive needs to be changed. All the fans need to be changed, and the keyboard needs to be changed. It's gonna be 300 to 500, but I can afford it. Thank you. And then once I get my next bundle in, which I don't know when I get it, but I'm getting these fairly regularly, so I'll consider it a good thing. Once I get my next bundle in, I'll buy a tabletop computer because I will also buy a very good computer chair with this money, meaning that when I do buy the next thing, I don't have to include the computer chair, which is expensive in it, and the tabletop computer becomes cheap enough to be affordable because tabletop is so much more powerful than a laptop. It is like a truck compared to a quick mini Uber. That's the difference. And then I will put the laptops both on Boeing calculations. Because this apartment is cold during the winter, I enjoy the extra heat that they generate. So all their downsides, which is that they generate heat, is actually good for this apartment. If it does happen to get hot enough to be uncomfortable, I'll turn down the batteries, the heater system in the apartment, because it's at full blast and it's still chilly inside. And that's with one window half open. So, you know, you know. If I have enough computer data, computer calculating power to have its primary environmental damage, I will have excess heat specifically because the core uses a lot of heat or generates a lot of heat more accurately. And at that point, if I turn the internal heating system, which runs from apartment to apartment, to zero, and it is still warm enough to be uncomfortable, then I will have a need to sell some of the computer capacity. Because the extra heat from the computers will travel through the pipes to the other apartments, causing cheaper overall heating costs for the entire building. And since I don't pay for my heat, but I do pay for my electricity, then I will actually be using the electricity I pay for to heat the entire building, saving everybody money. That's my point. They become producers of something besides raw brain power with heat at the point they require a system to conduct that heat somewhere. Then they become producers of environmental damage. Because the heat, if it doesn't pipe somewhere on its own naturally, then you require systems to pipe it out, and then you're talking about building an actual brain in that it's specialized to keep the environmental suitable for another species, and that's, I wouldn't say it's the biggest, but it is a pretty big environmental no-no. But if you place your data centers on the bottom floors of old buildings, you will heat them up with your data center without requiring extra things, in which case you'll be like the purest form of symbiotic life form available. You will use pure electrical charge to generate brain power that is just raw brain power. If we're lucky, you'll actually calculate something useful like the medical information I said about earlier. So fate is saying that if we ban coal as soon as it's economically possible and doesn't instantly kill 3.5 billion people, which might be around 2035, 2040 planet wide, we'll still see a warming of 2.5 degrees. but some of their data I question based on other simulators' data, not my own data. The Power and Revolutions game proposes that with full funding to your environmental budget, it will take you about 7 years for forests to start regrowing. That is what they are saying. And Fate of the World says 25 roughly. But 7 sounds appropriate. I mean, it sounds more believable than 25. If you go from Brazil today and you fund forest preservation at what the state can fund, let's say the fullest level of state involvement, like you would the military or the space program. 7 years to stop deforesting the Amazon? Okay, 25? No. We're talking about how powerful a modern state is when it starts to do something, and saying 25 years to get one thing done if it focuses on it is preposterous, in my opinion. You could even be talking about a few years, but I'll accept the Power and Revolutions data. I won't question it. I'll accept it. So we're talking about 7 years. We had to seriously increase the pollution taxation and deforestation taxation. But when we started to lower it later on, it did not influence the speed of the CO2 or deforestation efforts. It had no impact, so we lowered it quite a bit. Now we are seeing a downward trend where each power plant of non-renewables spikes it for about a year, and then it starts to decline again. It does a short burp-like effect, but it is continuously lowering. We are seeing possible ways out of this crisis with the Power and Revolutions game. There's possible ways out of this crisis. We're noticing, just as we predicted, that when the economic model works, and as a result of it, other countries start to do something similar, the price of oil is going to go up. That we noticed. There have been no shortages, no major wars that have even gone to the UN for arbitration. That would be a major war when it goes to the UN. It's like the judges in UFC. Might not be the best fighter, but for now it's one of the respected ones, so might as well. And there have been some crises like oil spills and epidemics, but they have been contained. They've been small-scale affairs. The planet is doing pretty fine. However, as soon as it was clear that our money was coming from the banking sector, our trade balance tanked. People bought our currency because we had the reputation of doing well with currency, and we just got a raw purchasing power increase without the associated industrial strength increase. And our foreign trade tanked. And we're still paying back our debts more than taking debts. And the currency value is increasing sharply. This is good for the economy, but were you to do this without paying any mind to foreign policy, you'd be pretty fucked. A lot of countries are going to have some opinions about our policy. They're going to have some stuff to say. Our industry is growing at a good rate. It'll be doing the China phenomena because it's now powerful enough to gently start lifting the population out of poverty. And it's running on because it's a basic form of industry goods that are plenty available in the country. And as that expands, we're going to see a larger and larger percentage of people out of poverty. And that's gonna drive the economy because we do have a population of 28 million. But our economy is not worth the money it's printed on. I believe our tax income is 14 to 18 trillion of the local currency units, which gives you some idea of the value of the currency at the moment. It has been going up for every about 5 years that I've been in government. It's a steady increase rate. That happens when you tax more than you use and you have a high interest rate and you pay back your debts. Then the currency value will increase. Then once you've paid back your debts and it looks likely that you won't be needing them much more, so you have a currency reserve, then others will seek to purchase your money. They will offer you their own money in exchange for your money for no apparent reason. Then you will be raking it in. But first you gotta pay your debts. Because loaning you money gives you the option of keeping some of it. But if that is not available, buying it is an option. And the state, being the greedy mother that it is, wants its finger in every pie. So it will try to have one currency unit of every unit available. It may not be able to do so, but it will make some effort towards that direction. On the off chance that one of these other players hits it really big, and you'll have a pile of their things in your bank account, just in case. That is a good investment policy. It guarantees you that your investments will grow at least at the rate of the planetary economic growth. The larger your investment base is, the more likely it is to hit one of those large numbers. To quote something a data center said, they said they have servers in 3 continents and they are able to survive even if one of these continents is destroyed. And if somebody destroys all their servers on 3 or more continents, it's a case of nuclear war, and then you don't need to worry about your data being safe. That was their policy. So it looks like, if I recall correctly, we're at 0.025% of the world economy, and we started at 0.015, and that's 5-ish years in. So we're looking at a poverty reduction and hunger reduction in the 5 to 10% range average. So we have 70% poverty. So let's say we reduce it to 10% using this model basically off of the domestic consumption and the money increase. We'll have a GDP increase of something on the order of 7 times what it was, and it was about 80%. So that'll be a lot. We could be talking fairly easily about 0.5. It might be pushing it, but it's possible to do 1 point, but not in 20 years, and not from 0.015. That is not something that can be done. However, I do believe that in 20 years of rulership, no matter the nation, you can get to space age if you focus on it. I adamantly believe that. So I have this for that reason. I will prove that in 20 years of rule, you get from any kind of civilization, and I'm taking as my vantage point a post-nuclear apocalypse civilization, and you can get to space age. Anything better than that can do it quicker, about 20 years from the poorest point. I believe so. And I have an idea of what the first satellite will be. I also have the thought of manned mission to Pluto by 2100 with this Madagascar. That's my thought. But I have a thought on what the first satellite will be. It will be ion engine, meaning that it uses electricity as propulsion material and doesn't need its own. Cargo storage space of basically roping material and towing material, and remote working hands, solar panels, and a very small nuclear engine. Not anyway large enough that if it blows up during liftoff or explodes in orbit, we'll see any kind of problem. So it has to be very small. And the ability to, after it reaches space, tow an object to lunar orbit and back if it wants. That's the first satellite that I'm building. Then I will politely contact every space nation and say that if they want, very specifically, we can take their wrecked satellites, the ones that they've decommissioned, and put them in safe storage, because naturally these objects, when they're in space, they tend to come down to Earth eventually. If you have the types of objects that you'd like to keep in space, but have run out of fuel, for example, we can assure you with our technology that we can keep them in space. And then we'd make a small presentation about what we, in a few years, estimate we can build for you in space with the satellites. Like if you have 5 extra satellites, what we can do in terms of making more modules for your space station, like the ISS, for example, in space. But that is the second stage. That is what we are aiming for. Then if you are somebody like the Soviet Union, which collapsed at its peak when it had, I don't know how many, but let's say cautiously 1,000 satellites, and you're Russia, your Soviet Union's inheritor, you use about 100 of those satellites, and 700 of them are too old to be used. And if we can make one module for the ISS with 5, we can offer you that if you ship 5 normal satellite carrying rockets carrying the construction gear that we want, plus those satellites, we can build you a space station that makes the ISS look like ant shit. That would be stage 3. That would be our plan. And if this works, we'll do it at a rate of about about 1/10 to 1/100th of the cost that your domestic industry would be able to do it, because we're Madagascar. One of the benefits of being a poor nation is that others understand that the cost of your services is low. So if they are somebody who can actually do something and they come from a poor nation, you better hire them. That will be our space program. Once we get to the stage where we have a sufficient industry in orbit, where we're building for others, because we won't be interested in building much for ourselves at this point, we will build a launch system in orbit from this junk that others leave floating around, because we're a trash collecting society, believe me. We will be building a larger and larger interplanetary thing that we will be trying to take to first Mars and return, and then to the asteroid belt and return, and so on and so forth. We will be building a space hotel that can fly. But this is in 50 years if we do this with the Madagascar model. We have previously done some stuff that we wanted to see in space, but now we're doing it with what can be described as domestic industry. And we are very interested in increasing higher learning and other things of that nature. Oh, and if you have any ideas of how to lower the infant mortality, we'd be glad to hear you. We're at a little worse than the planetary average, which is pretty appallingly high. We have 3 main causes of death: lung disorders, cancer, stroke, and neonatal. Forward. Tuberculosis was 5 to 10%. Stroke was 15%. Neonatal was 15%, meaning that 15% of the entire population dies before the age of 18. It's pretty bad. Pretty bad, I think. Stroke was 15%, meaning that work conditions are abhorrently bad. People are, when they have strokes, they are under survival pressure. Strokes are very unlikely in situations where you are not under pressure. And in environments where you have family people around you, dying from a stroke is very unlikely, because it will make you incapable of understanding that you need help far before it will kill you. If the people around you understand what a stroke looks like, your probability of surviving from a stroke is incredibly high. It's incredibly high. And if you have already in your life gone through trauma, then you know how the brain rebuilds itself. So the after effects won't be that bad. It'll be annoying, but in a good condition, it isn't fatal. But if you work 40 hours a week and you can be expected to continue working while sick, which is what 40 hours means, then you will have a series of mini strokes, and that culminates in a heart attack. And then you will die. So if you want to lower the incidence of stroke in your country, I recommend that you shorten the work week and increase the recreational capabilities. Also, improving healthcare education for the general public is very important. I believe that national service training period should be mandatory for both sexes, and the vast majority of it should be instructed towards either one of two categories: basic survival in your society in different conditions, ranging from forests to paying your bills, and ability to help your common man in need. All first aid courses, etc., all crowd control courses, security passes, etc. All those things should be taught in the national service. It should be the shortest length possible to teach those things well for everyone. And as soon as it's over, there should be two options other than that it's over for you. One is that you want a government job at some point, in which case you resign and they basically assign you to a school. And, you go there for 2 weeks, you take 3 days off, you turn up at the government site, and we see how your work improves, and so on and so forth. These guys get a minimum of weapons training, but they are competent enough. It means that every government employee may not carry a gun, but if you rob them, they know if it's a fake gun. That's roughly what it means. And they may be able to, for example, if you leave your gun behind, pick it up and use it against you. Stuff like that. It'll force a certain level of discomfort upon violent offenders. And then the other path is that you wish for a military job, in which case you're guaranteed a certain rate of military advancement every period. It means that, for example, you're guaranteed that with 6 months of service, your chance of being an NCO is 30%, for example. With 12 months, it raises to 70%. With 18 months, it raises to 95%, and so on and so forth. And you're given weapons branches, conditions to apply, and benefits of appliance, mostly in the knowledge of how fast you'll ascend through the ranks, how much they expect you to do, and how quickly they'll ascend you in ranks. And they basically promise you that you can get out at any point, basically barring your entire unit being under self-annihilation conditions. They can't guarantee you that if you're surrounded by the enemy, you'll be allowed to run away through the enemy. That they cannot guarantee you. But anything prior to that, for example, mobilization time to war, mobilization for an offensive, you can legally decline to do anything. You can just walk. But if you stay, if you, for example, are in peacekeeping field duties, they can tell you how much quicker you'll ascend through the ranks than if you're a storage cleric, for example. They need both, but they'll tell you how fast it is for each rank. And that is about it. Those two choices are given to you. If you wish to walk, then you just apply to the civilian market and continue with your life. But you have first aid, crowd control, security, driver's license, up to a train if you want, an air pilot's license, etc. Those have been trained for you based on what you applied for when you applied for national service. And school is just school. It's to make sure that you can read and write and know roughly your nation's history and so on and so forth. That's school. National service is national service. That's how I believe it should be done. I'm thinking it should be 3 months. Doing national service Only if you very specifically apply for it and you can show that you would benefit from it are you given a weapons training. Everything else will be much easier. But during the 3 months, you are not made for combat. Then if you take either of those two paths after the primary training, and you can take the military for 3 months, for example, which would make you a total 6 months, then you are made for combat. That would be my idea. If we compress military training to 2 months, we can make your combat abilities Green Beret, but we need more time than that to make your life qualities Green Beret, and those translate into your chance of surviving the field, and not your chance of killing the other guy. Therefore, schooling has to be good, or the national service period has to have a life training period. Otherwise, when you return from the field somewhat traumatized, you may become a great source of trauma to society, thus causing your damage to us to increase. Meaning that we may have survived the battle, but we lost the war. So that will be my Interspace Age in 20 years plan. If I'm running a very long-term administration, then I will say to Pluto in 2100. We need a very strict, very specific outline, but I can promise you we can do it. I have concluded that all these space age plans require two things: taking care of the planet while increasing massively the industrial and domestic capabilities of the planet. But one cannot be done without the other. It costs you money to protect the environment. The poor people will eat everything, including the grass and each other. It requires money to pay for the food that they don't need to eat the wildlife. Then it requires money to actually make the wildlife so that it's not one enormous herd of wildlife. One, herd of cows with no variance. It all takes money, and you cannot afford it for. And during the industrial expansion period, you will at sometimes take slices from this wildlife while having a consistent policy to increase it. And then you will go into more and more inhospitable places, increasing life as you go, in my opinion. It will be glorious, but very challenging. I believe that as soon as third generation biofuels cost of 1 gallon of fuel is actually competitive with petrol, we will see an end to the CO2 problem, I believe. That's my honest belief. When you can run your car cheaper on algae fuel than rock petroleum, then you will run your car on algae fuel. That's the reason electrical cars have taken such a leap. Biofuels can be inserted into rock petroleum without needing any work on the engine, to the order of perhaps 20%. But if you make it completely from biofuel, you need to change some of the valves, but the basic cylinder structure, etc., is fine. There is no need to change that. Some of the, I believe, spark plugs need to be changed. It is very minor work. It can be done in any garage anywhere. But if you don't do the work, then you can add up to 20% of biofuel into rock petroleum and still have it work in a car. Though the rate of maintenance on some models does increase the need of maintenance. Overall, though, if you can get the biofuel for free or cheaper, then it is most certainly a good option. I would say perhaps 10-20% cheaper would be worthwhile. And that is the purpose of biofuels. The first generation was the turning of land into biofuel, the literal turning of farming land. And it is somewhere between 1 to 5 times more efficient in terms of entire impact on everybody than rock petroleum, but it did cause an increase in food prices as expected. We factored that in, but it was still unfortunate. And second generation is turning of bio waste, anything from like municipal waste to flue gas to flue anything, you know what I mean, waste into fuel. And that was about 5 to 20 times more efficient than rock petroleum in terms of what we're going for. It is acceptable. And third generation is turning anything that in nature turns carbon dioxide into its own material at the highest rate of production in the ecosphere. And that is algae that turns CO2 in normal or salt water or wastewater into more copies of itself with sunlight and CO2 and water. We are getting rates of 300 times more efficient than natural forest. We're getting roughly those rates. So if we turn, let's say 1/250th of the natural forest into third generation biofuels, we will get CO2 extraction from the atmosphere of about 1.5 times of the entire forest base. That's what third generation biofuels mean. Which means that if we turn desert land or low grade land that is not forest into third generation biofuels that can support third generation biofuels, then we only need to turn that amount to double the forest rate of carbon extraction from the atmosphere. It will all turn into green goo. The process is simple. Once you have the green goo, you put it into a large container and you either compress it by mechanical means, in other words, increase the atmospheric pressure until it turns into a liquid, and then you use either chemicals or other bacteria to turn that liquid into petroleum. It is very efficient. It's cost per gallon has gone from 450, which is excessive in 2000, I think 14 or 13 or something, to about 7 or so in 2018. It is a very new technology. It is experiencing very rapid growth. If we continue, it'll hit about 4 per gallon in 2020 to 25. Then we're talking about fuel that is made from carbon dioxide. Literally carbon dioxide turned into fuel, petroleum. You can make any kind of kerosene or other. And with present rates, I wouldn't be surprised if it's cheaper than rock petroleum at its average low point in about 2025 to 2030. Then people will look at a map of gas stations, see where they serve biofuel, and then they will buy a car that can run on biofuel if it is locally available. And I believe most gas stations serve 20% mix at the moment, I believe. So that is what I believe will happen. Once the third generation biofuels become available, their usage will absolutely skyrocket. Once they reach a phase where they're roughly competitive with rock petroleum, it will absolutely fucking if you have a coal power plant which produces a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and you capture all of that, and you look at the number of how much it produces. You compare that against the cost of biofuel from that entire carbon dioxide production, and the total produced amount of petroleum from the carbon dioxide. Then you look at the funding that your region gives for reduction of carbon dioxide, and the selling price and the taxation income from selling that production thing from your government. And you conclude if that is competitive with the thought of going from the current pollution with the thing to no pollution with the thing in terms of how other countries view you. Because that's like, you have to view against how it changes the environment around you. And we are currently, as a planetary species, very worried about carbon dioxide. So if you do that and you eliminate a single very large carbon dioxide producer that you can then continue to run, then you will be doing some things. Because you will immediately reduce rock petroleum mining by a lot, and that will have a significant impact on atmospheric carbon. You will no longer need to import expensive fuels. Because if you had domestic access to them, you wouldn't have a coal power plant. You'd have a whatever, the expensive fuel that your country could produce power plant. It seems the carbon dioxide outline that I have in the model is good. It's not it's not very good, but it is good enough. It relies heavily on building wind and solar. You are allowed to build trash recycling and biomass incineration and waste incineration and so on and so forth. But with a couple of conditions, such as your forest mass needs to be increasing and your CO2 production needs to be going down. So if those are happening, you can build new ones. But you need to start with looking very carefully at reducing your coal and other non-renewable usage. You can still produce it for the foreign market, but you kinda shouldn't use it domestically if you can. Drive down the prices and the consumption at the same time. It's hard, but can be done. And biomass is about 3 times less polluting in produced wattage hours versus coal. So if you disband one coal, build one biomass, and one wind or solar, you will make more energy production and it will be greener while not requiring you to jump immediately to completely renewables. And that's what I've been doing. My coal production is now so small that I cannot realistically reduce it, and my biomass production is essentially the same number, not the same, not being able to reduce. I could slightly reduce the biomass, I think, because it indicates that there is only one generator in the game. First, building solar and wind, and at the same time, water, because you can store the energy from the wind and the solar very, very efficiently in the pumpage system of a hydro dam. You can store it very efficiently there. That one primary highway between the capital in the northern central highlands and the second largest city, as far as I can tell, in the very southern parts of the mountain was a very good idea. The effects it had is very good. The secondary highway network is pretty good, but we need an actual signal of primary highways They're not in as much to be used, though they can be used. But we need the idea that this is as high as cars will go, according to modern understanding. And we have connected these 2 points because we are in expansion. And in expansion, you usually buy one of everything. And in this particular case, it indicates that it might be used. And having seen the effects on the world, I believe that it is being used. Next, we are thinking either into the edge of the forest in the east, because there's only forest in the east. There's a large bubble of it there. Or north, which is pretty undeveloped but closest to the equator, meaning that it will be the best condition to develop solar and most likely also wind. Or do the northwest, which is the roughly the closest port line to the capital. It is what will develop in terms of trade, and we have an enormous trade deficit, so boosting trade might be worthwhile, and also building a port. Or continuing from the most southern point to the part at the very edge of the desert, which might also be a very profitable place for a solar farm. And also with the growth of forestation, the forest might be a very good long-term investment. The desert might be a very good long-term investment as the forest expands. If we can induce a trend of continuing to expand the forest, then the most deserted part knows that it will most likely grow, because it will be the furthest point from this change. It will most likely grow from it. Those closest to it will be enveloped by it. They will be changed. The most furthest point may be changed by other things first. So we have found two very key things we need to do in the next iteration. Other is to get contraceptive usage to a minimum of 70% from its current 63%, minimum of 70%. And the other is to lower the abortion rights from absolute voting age from 17 to 16 after we have concluded that the contraception rate increase has made the population suitable for that kind of interaction. We had to increase some of these ages from their starting points to get to this unified lower point.
Such as alcohol usage.
Was former French colony, alcohol usage age was very low. And interest rate was the second most important. The unified age was third most important. Interest rate lowering to 15% was second most important. There we go. Interest rate has to be lowered from its current 16.5 to 15 because inflation rate is 7.15. To control inflation and economic growth, which is about 8 to 14%, was 16% peaking, but it was 8 to 14% at its average. This year it's been about 7. To increase economic growth rate and to control inflation towards interest, we have to lower interest. If interest is very much higher than inflation, then you're wasting a lot of money as a state. Your money should come from your currency reserve, and that with your interest rate should be your current economic growth. Then if somebody happens to have economic growth, it should be nice, and your currency value should be increasing. Then when you need to spend something, you can just actually print money very directly to increase the inflation rate. But that should only happen in an emergency, and your average interest should be in having the interest rate above the inflation rate, which causes deflation, so that everybody gets more money, meaning that your economy is worthwhile to others over the long term. If you have high inflation rate, then it's not worthwhile in the long term. Just isn't. And starting as a poor country whose average currency unit value is something like on the order of 10,000 of these will buy $1, you will be with a interest rate above inflation rate, very, very rich in the future. Unbelievably rich. You will be like unto the Bitcoin trillionaire. Then you just save, if you're getting paid something like 1,000 euros and you get paid in local currency units like 3 million, then you save like 100,000 a month in a foreign bank. Just tell them that this is in my currency units, I'm saving it in your bank. Not want to exchange these to dollars, just my units. Just keeping it there. then you every now and then ask how much they'll pay for your pile. And if the policy is working, if you invest, say, 10 euros a month, the first month they'll pay you 10 euros, and the next month they'll pay you 22 euros, because it's 20 euros plus the 1% interest for both. So say they'll pay you 22%. Our interest rate is 16.5 a year. So if you invest 1,000 in a year, you will have 1,650 after inflation and taxes that year, because our wealth tax is 0 for having money in a bank. It might be 1% for having money in a bank, far below inflation minus interest minus inflation. It is about 8% interest minus inflation, while economic growth is about 7.5, meaning that having money on a bank account or investing money into the economy produces the same amount of money for you on average, which I believe is a little bit wrong. It should be, if you invest in the economy, it's a little bit better than just holding it in the bank account. How much better depends on your loans ranking. The better ranked your loan is, the more you should technically give out to investors, meaning that the lower your interest rate should be after inflation in comparison with your GDP growth. Because our interest rate is higher after inflation than our GDP growth, we are showing that any kind of interest is getting the same amount back, instead of interest into the fields that we actually are interested in as well is giving you more. We are giving out a sickening signal. So we will be producing the next one. We have found many variations of things that technically work but shouldn't be tried, that are counterproductive. That information we believe is very valuable. And we believe so we're thinking 15% interest rate, 8% inflation rate, and 8 to 9% GDP growth. We're thinking. Then if that works and contraception rate continues to increase while child mortality continues to decrease, then at some point we will look at population growth. it is currently in the negative because we have a very contraceptive tolerant policy while we have no immigration, while we have immigration, and we have a fairly high child mortality. So our total population growth is negative. If even after we remove child mortality to a great extent, we still have no population growth, then I must conclude that the data set is bugged because there are a few of these that are, when you, for example, make abortions from the second most liberal to the most liberal option, the birth rate immediately the very same day drops by like 30%. Nothing like a gentle slope, and there isn't any peaks or valleys, and nothing influences it. The population growth is negative 0.23%, I think. And even if we increase or decrease any other attribute, if we don't touch the contraceptive and abortion policies at their most liberal end, and even if we do things like give adoption rights, it doesn't influence population growth numbers. So I think that slider is stuck, I think. But if it is, then we must conclude that after child mortality lowers, if population growth remains at its, I think it's 0.23% negative, then we will manually adjust one of those opinion sliders to get it to positive ground, because I don't like negative population growth. I like very slow, very gradual population growth. And we have sliders to adjust this thing manually. If you can be guaranteed a policy of contraception, in that if you state to your healthcare provider or your spouse that you are on contraceptives and you go off them without informing anybody and get pregnant, then in the end you may not be entitled to an abortion in such a case. If you are very specifically lying to your other partner about being on contraceptives and your healthcare provider about being on contraceptives, in meaning that from the point of view of the healthcare, everybody is on contraceptives at all times unless they very specifically break the moral code. And the moral code is a personal choice of being on contraceptives. So if you, despite that, and the only condition I can think of is that you're together with somebody and you both decide to get pregnant with the doctor knowing about it, and you break up with them later on, the baby is healthy, and you can be expected to carry it full term and give it up for adoption, then you may not be entitled to a pregnancy abortion. But you are never obligated to take care of another person. That is one of the state's obligations in modern society. If you are poor and you have a child and you cannot take care of it, you are legally allowed to give it away without any moral obligation. The part of adoption to another family will always be so pleasant that there will be no hassle about it. So that these thoughts will take generations and iterations to actually come to pass, but they will be the leading thoughts. And similarly, children can apply for a new set of parents if they so choose. It's emancipation. I'm gonna I'm gonna go do some things on my own, and then I'm gonna play Masters. I feel an urge to do these corrections quickly. Actually, let's try something.
Mäkkäristä saat aina enemmän pikkurahalla.
Metsiensuomi.fi.
Ready? Fight!
This fight clock is brought to you by Toyo Tires, the official tire of the UFC. Rafael Fazid in black, Bobby Green in the center of the octagon in white.
Green is
One of the things that Rafael said is that Bobby Green was not being
13.5%
He said
interest rate.
that's one of the tough things about it,
Is
but
of
it's also
the
a unique
opinion
one
in
that
general
because
to
I'm
put
the
the interest rate as low as possible.
Yeah, that whole
Fiziev
yeah, for sure.
is Let's keep it at the
a guy that said he doesn't really enjoy it. He always seems to be
lower
having a
end
pretty good
of
time when he
the
goes out there.
inflation interest
Walking out.
GDP combo.
Yeah. He's a showman, right? The guy is definitely
Green
a
is,
showman.
let's keep it a tiny bit
And he
above
is a smart
inflation.
fighter. His fight IQ has drawn high reviews over the course of his career.
And
A thinking
roughly
man's fighter
saying,
too, which speaks to your
fuck
point,
the
Dom,
GDP
about
growth.
trying to read the way Fiziev moves, as he told us on Thursday. He moves his trunk so well that he can stand with his hands down. I think you missed it because his trunk, his upper half moves so well, and that's why he's standing. He almost baits you into throwing so he can counter you.
But he does that from range, right? His hands are down at range. But when he's close, he actually picks him up. The only time he did was when he fought Dustin Poirier. And he said that's why Dustin Poirier got him and knocked him out the way that he did. But look at that, even that, right? He's always rolling his shoulders, always having his hands up when he's in range.
Fiziev exuding a lot of footwork here in the early going. And Bobby Green holding the center, saying, go ahead, hop around him and keep taking out your knees. We're coming in and I'm going to counter you on the way in. Good footwork by Rafael, though, 100%. Those kicks, I mean, they're lightning fast kicks. Hard to counter.
And Fiziev, Fiziev said he looked forward to the trash talk inside the octagon. You see him trying to talk to Bobby.
If Steve's a talker, there's no doubt. Yeah, he literally said, I like to talk, and he likes to talk. I look forward to having a conversation. And as his English improves, he'll be gum flapping even more. Look how he makes him just barely. I mean, it doesn't look safe. Just to tell you that.
Very good kicks and punches from Fiziev. Green is playing a little not committingly. Fiziev is hopping away very convincingly.
Under Henry Hooft, who he met in Thailand back in the day, so it's a long-standing connection between those two.
Probing attacks by Green. Very good probe, counter probe, very straight punch. Green is still on top in the tactic game, but Fiziev is when he gets through, he does a lot of damage.
Well, if you saw the UFC 265 weigh-in show yesterday, who didn't? But Michael Chandler said he fancies his teammate Rafael Fiziev as a future UFC champion.
I mean, Fiziev is throwing, and we've seen him land a lot of these strikes on fighters, but it's not only Bobby shoulder, but he's also pivoting.
Green is
Watch him pivot.
occasionally running away.
If Fiziev tries to return, Green
Give
not
the
only
high
shoulder
five
roll, but he
to
pivots
each
off the
other
turn.
for,
And if Fiziev ends up looking in the opposite direction where Green was,
well, the
What I like about Green
situation.
is he's first and third. First he'll fake the teep, then he'll wait for the counter, then he'll fire back on the counter of Fiziev. I mean, that's first and third, and that's what he's so good at, with his hands down and just making you miss, and it's just fun to watch.
and Fiziev will grow regardless, right? He'll, even if he gets through this
They're
fight,
both
a
trying
long
to
fight, he'll
Fiziev
grow. Being
kicked
in there with a
while
long
Green
time
punched
veteran like
them
this.
both
But right
landed.
now, for as good as Bobby's looking, it still looks like Fiziev is having a good round.
Oh, yeah. He's landed a lot more kicks.
Elbow from Green.
Elbow got close. Gotta put that mouthpiece down.
That's what Fiziev.
Nice left hand by Green there. Both guys have had their moments through 4+ minutes. And what a good adjustment by Fiziev. You know, he keeps throwing the body kick, because you can't
Neither
move your
side
head with the
has
body
a
kicks. You just
good
got to stay there
dominance.
and eat them. And now he's getting ahead on the strikes. And now you get Bobby Green a little behind, and you make the very hard to find man easier
Green
to find
is
because he has to come forward to you because you're getting ahead on the kicks.
very
Nice.
well
Look at right
on the
hand to a body kick.
intuitive black person. While Fiziev is doing the
Elbow over the top. Green shakes that off. His head movement has been outstanding early.
mechanics of the
Been a
model
very
very
competitive
well.
first round. Both guys having moments, both landing a lot of strikes.
Absolute chess match. All right, as advertised through 5, round 2 forthcoming. Round 2, fight. Hot action early round 2, D. Thomas, what do you have?
Harder exchange because it's later in the game. This is a 3-round match, so they have to pick up roughly in the second round. First one is
more difficult to see the punch
most
swing
often
because they're coming from his
fairly
hip. It's
probing,
hard to
and
see
then
that.
you go to your coaches in the corner and talk for a minute about what you should do, and they
Range with that
usually
left hand.
encourage you
Same
to
exact
take it
reason
up a
my hands
little.
are
You guys don't get hit. Been in the game that long. Still
And
taking
in the
punch
third
damage.
one, it's usually
I'll
all
get hit,
out.
but he's got a way of slipping, just like you said.
If there's about a minute left in the round, it doesn't really matter who's really winning, but if a clear winner is evident in
just so dangerous this
the
competition.
first minute or
I
2
remember Govv
minutes,
telling me like 10
usually
years
just
ago,
one guy getting
defensively,
beat up.
your mindset needs to be that those are swords.
But if it's the last minute, one guy can usually convincingly defend himself against anything for a minute and then just sit down and be good for at least 3 or 4 minutes. He's gonna wear out towards the end, but he's gonna be good for at least a while.
Govv is just constantly pressing though. Constantly going forward, trying to get Bobby to fight him. Because he understands that he's going to throw more than Bobby Green, giving himself more chances to try to land that strike that's going to end the fight.
Just gets out of the pocket at the right time, turns the corner, but the combinations of the forward pressure, if Govv does add up when they start kicking the legs and the body the way he's doing.
Fiziev is kicking pretty well. Green is shaking his head when he gets hit, and that's the I'm not even here to thing. And that's, I don't know, it doesn't look good. That looked like a good nut shot. Green turned the energy of me narrating versus the narrator to the deaf community, and the fact that I'm actually narrating the fight and not talking weird background stuff, and that's the sound of him getting kicked in the nuts for it.
Govv loves to talk as he's pressing it.
Fiziev landed very good few punches. Green isn't phased much, but he wasn't really phased.
Govv is so technical.
He was pushed against the fence, and he was avoiding the punches, and some of them landed pretty well, but he avoided most. Then he pushed to the side and continued punching Fiziev a few times.
Nice counter right from Green after a third from Govv. Oh my gosh. And then he gets right in the clinch at the right time. Instead of sitting there trading, you grab a hold of the clinch, kind of nullify it for a second, let's reset.
Those body kicks starting to wear on Bobby though.
Yep. You can't eat body kicks all day.
I love Fiziv's head movement, man, and then the way he throws. When he rolls that head, when his head drops off to the left, and watch the left hook come. It's beautiful. There it is. See that? Every time he pops left hand comes. And he pops right hand comes. Kid's talented, man.
Straight right is good for Fiziev. Under 2 minutes here in round 2. Big difference is the output of Fiziev is higher.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Bobby Green's not throwing quite as many kicks, that's what's putting him behind us. Fiziv's throwing more kicks.
In terms of damage and strikes and shots landed, in terms of the hands, Bobby Green is landing good as Fiziv is landing. But Fiziv's throwing the body kicks, he's throwing elbows when they come in close, he's hitting them at the legs.
Yeah, he's filling the gaps just a little bit more. Bobby's making a miss, and he's landing the big hands and some body kicks, but Fiziv's landing just a little bit more, filling in the gaps. Crowd starting to get behind Bobby Green. He's asking for more now. He's landed. Has 3 punches in a row. 4 and 5. And this fight is a fan favorite for so long.
Oh, elbows, guys. Big elbow and tight there by Fiziv. Nice left elbow there. Yep. They came together, right, John?
And I believe that is what opened up a cut on the bridge of the nose of Bobby Green, who has this crowd eating out of his hand right now. About 30 seconds to go, round 2.
How do you not respect Bobby Green, man? He's in there with a young guy in Rafael Fiziv, a guy that so many are saying he has next level striking. He's a future champion. And as he's done so many times before, Bobby's in there testing him at a level that Fiziv hasn't been to this point.
Great round 2 between Green and Fiziv. Final 5 minutes. Coming up. Round 3. Fight. Third and final round of our feature prelim over the pay-per-view at the top of the hour.
I really don't know if there's two guys in the card that like to have this much showmanship, though.
No.
I mean, just they're playing a game right now. It looks like game for death.
Bobby Green's longtime head coach and mentor Sam Mason calling for volume in this third and final round.
He understands, right? He understands exactly what Dominic is saying.
Green was a little defensive in the second round, so he better pick it up in this one. I agree.
And you know what's crazy about Bobby Green and all the theatrics?
Fiziev
In the
is
middle
pushing
of it all,
more
the
now.
dude has really high level skills.
No doubt.
Bobby is
Every
at the
time
edge
Fiziev
of
throws
the
the body
edge
kick,
of
his
the
arm
cage,
forward and goes to the
circling
block.
while Fiziev is
He
at the
rolls and
center.
throws punches. Now Fiziev is fighting a great fight, right? But for the most part, these guys are just training, doing their thing.
And Bobby Green's getting tagged. He is.
Yeah.
He's just saying, you know what, let's keep going, keep hitting me. And it almost makes it look like it's not letting. We all know it is, but it's just showmanship.
And to be able to fight and talk and everything, he's in tremendous shape.
Well, he does 20-minute rounds. He doesn't, when he spars, he just spars for 20 minutes. He doesn't
Green
really do
has
limits.
picked
He
up
just
the
goes.
pace,
And so he finds a
but
way
he
to
is
control
getting
his
punched
start time.
fairly hard regularly for it.
We talked about this
But
earlier,
he is
Cruz.
pushing
Fight
up a
the
harder
ego.
pace.
When you're a little bit outmatched,
Green is
in
very
terms of skill,
accurate and
you
picks
fight
his
the ego,
shots
and that's
very
what Bobby Green's
carefully,
doing right
but
now
they
to
don't
Fiziev.
knock
Stand
Fiziev
here.
out. So
Don't move. Let's
if
just
he
fight.
Green out, so if Green pushes, he can
Stand there.
force Fiziev back and take control of the center because he's
And don't look now, but
a
Bobby Green is
more
heading to his
high
third
range
round. He is
puncher,
closing the gap.
but he does get hit pretty bad for it.
86-83 now.
Right through the middle. I mean, Fiziev slowed
But
down.
it
and
does
all
indeed
those
look
kicks
like
he
Fiziev
threw
is
added up,
controlling
too.
the match.
Don't forget, those take energy. Even if they're not being blocked, even if they are being blocked, it doesn't matter. It takes energy to throw that many
However,
kicks.
I would say that true control might rest with Fiziev. However, judges will tell.
You can tell Fiziev slowing down and getting a little tired too.
And yes, Fiziev is getting
I mean, these
tired.
guys are face to face. They're not even at kick range. They're like right in that boxing pocket
Yeah.
range, just trading.
In the phone booth. But now Bobby Green has picked up the activity and he's ahead of Fiziev in terms of output in the third round. Fiziev needs to do something to slow Bobby Green down. More kicks to the body, more kicks to the leg. He's got to catch up a little bit, like that.
With about 2 minutes to go, Bobby Green unofficially is now outlanded Rafael Fiziev.
Big one, too.
A big right hand.
Very
right to
good
his
punch
toe.
from Green. A straight
Forget about the
right
team
or a
kicks Bobby
little
Green's
hooked
throwing in there,
right.
too, to that body. Those
Straight
add
to
up.
the jaw.
He's stabbing those in there just every now and then. Then the body punch, then the right hand of the body, and then he throws the teep kick to the body, and then to the knee, and then the 1-2s. I mean, he's just mixing.
But he
it to
is
all
getting
parts of
pushed
the body
back
so
by
well.
Fiziev consistently when he goes in, but he does have control for it.
The fakes, he's faking right now, and it's keeping.
If this was a 5-round match and Fiziev had same physique, he'd lose, but he probably pushed too hard because it's a short match. But he does seem to have worse physique. And Green seems to be winning the endurance competition.
This fight's insane.
The skill is so high in this fight.
Fiziev with a body kick there. He's finished most of his wins, so it holds some valuable longer form experience here. 1 minute to go.
Crowd screaming Bobby right now.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe this. Oh, nice little right hand off the jab. Bobby stick.
Ooh, big
Left
kick.
hand.
Nice kick.
And a high kick.
Nice knee to the body there off that takedown attempt. Caught the leg, followed it up.
Some very close early rounds. Third round, Bobby Green has fought a beautiful round.
I would say it's
Definitely his best round in the fight.
29-28
I think
for Fiziev.
Fiziev's second round was better than Bobby's.
But it depends if this third round will be 8-10. Might be 8-10 round.
Fazim hurt here at the end. Ooh, and a big right from Green.
Oh my goodness.
It's
Baby, he's on him. Whoa, what a fight.
40th pro MMA fight for Bobby Green, and that's what he has left. Wasn't enough.
Ladies and gentlemen, after 3 rounds, we go to the judges' scorecards for decision. The judges scored the contest 30-27, 29-28, and 29-28 for the winner by unanimous decision, Rafael Albanesian.
Yes, that sounds roughly like what I saw. So, Madagascar and yeah, Madagascar. This was good radio. Thank you.